Beneath a banner carrying my late wife's name, my daughter-in-law assured 400 donors that every dollar they had given us was accounted for. I knew that was a lie. The ballroom erupted in applause. I applauded too. Lauren raised her champagne glass and looked directly at me. She believed I had approved one final payment of $74,000. She had no idea the auditor sitting beside me had already found the trail she thought no one would ever trace. 3 months earlier, I found a red folder on our bookkeeper's desk. I had gone to the foundation office to review award files. 22 students were due to receive scholarships. More than 400 guests were expected at the gala, and pledged donations could exceed $1 million. The event was the largest we'd had attempted. That made careful spending more important, not less. Tiana Brooks placed her hand on it before I could pick it up. "Not yet," she said. It was an unusual answer from a woman who normally had documents ready before anyone asked. "What am I waiting for?" She glanced toward Lauren's closed office door. "Supporting records." Inside the folder was an invoice for an emergency production advance of $48,000. The vendor was North Star Event and Outreach. The description referred to staging materials, expedited audiovisual equipment, transportation, and donor engagement support. There was no equipment list, no delivery schedule, and nothing showing which services fell outside the hotel package we had already purchased. "What made it an emergency?" I asked. Lauren said the price would increase if we waited. Tiana opened an email chain. She had requested crew names, an equipment schedule, and proof of service. Lauren answered that event production involved moving parts and that delayed payment could jeopardize the gala. "Did Nathan review the invoice?" "His approval is in the system. My son was the foundation's treasurer. His approval should have reassured me. Instead, it made the missing support more difficult to explain." Lauren came out of her office carrying seating charts with a headset resting around her neck. "Howard, you found the emergency advance," she said. "I was going to walk you through it." She did not look cornered. She looked like a capable professional mildly inconvenienced by people who did not understand her work. Lauren said the gala had outgrown the hotel's original package. North Star had reserved specialized capacity on short notice and bundled several services at a preferred rate. Separating them, she warned, would cost more and risk inconsistent production. She spoke in the language she used with sponsors and board members: access, urgency, reserved capacity, donor experience. Each phrase sounded reasonable. Together, they created the impression that asking for ordinary documentation could endanger the entire event. Tiana asked for an equipment list. Lauren gave a patient smile. "These vendors reserve access, crews, subtractors, trucks, and inventory. An event invoice does not read like an office supply receipt. Then documenting that access should be simple." Her smile narrowed. "It will all be in the final vendor file." I asked how long we had used North Star. "More than a year," she said. "They gave us favorable pricing because they believe in the mission." "Who owns the company?" "Howard, I have 300 seating changes and a production deadline. Can we finish the vendor biography after the gala?" She answered a telephone call and turned away to discuss table linen as if the question had been settled. Tiana waited until Lauren's door closed. Every time I asked for proof of service, Lauren sent me a new explanation instead. I copied the invoice and email chain, then walked into the lobby. Rosa Martinez's handwritten letter hung where it had been displayed since the foundation opened. Seeing it after North Star's invoice reminded me that every line in our accounts represented time someone else was waiting to receive. I had spent 38 years in public education, the last 17 as principal of Westbridge High School. My wife, Margaret, worked down the hall as a guidance counselor. I dealt with budgets, teachers, safety meetings, and worried parents. Margaret understood why a student stopped completing assignments even when the student refused to say. She kept bus passes and granola bars in her desk. She knew whose mother had begun chemotherapy, who was sleeping on a relative's sofa, and who was quietly working enough hours to make college impossible. Margaret never made students perform their difficulties for her. She noticed the untouched lunch, the application folded into a backpack, or the sudden announcement that college was no longer part of the plan. Then she asked practical questions until the real obstacle had a name. Rosa was one of those students. She had been accepted to a state university, but planned to remain at the grocery store because her family needed her wages. Margaret found a scholarship, helped secure 3 smaller grants, and worked with Rosa's family so the girl would not have to surrender her future to an immediate bill. The tuition was only part of the problem. Rosa needed time away from a second shift to complete forms, help her younger brothers, and prepare to leave home. Margaret spent 2 weeks building a path around those pressures without making Rosa feel that ambition was a betrayal of her family. A scholarship is not charity, Margaret told me. It is time purchased for a young person who has never been allowed enough of it. Rosa went to college. Years later, she sent us the letter that now hung in the lobby. You did not pay for my tuition. You bought me enough time to become someone. Margaret framed it and placed it where every student entering her office could read it. When she died 3 years after we retired, our home became quiet in ways I had never known a house could be quiet. Nathan handled telephone calls. Lauren organized the memorial and remembered which flowers Margaret disliked. Then everyone returned to their lives, and I was left with 2 coffee cups in the cabinet and no reason to reach for the second one. For months, I avoided Margaret's study because her yellow lamp still illuminated the chair where she had read scholarship applications. Grief made ordinary objects feel like accusations. Selling the lake house was not a grand act of generosity. I sold it because I could not stay there, and because Margaret had spent her life turning resources into time for students. Margaret and I had owned a modest vacation house near a lake. After her death, every room felt like a conversation interrupted. I sold it and used most of the proceeds to establish the Margaret Ellis Opportunity Foundation. We supported students who would be the first in their families to attend college, who had strong records and limited means, who cared for relatives, or who faced leaving school because their families needed their wages. Sometimes one payment was all that kept an enrollment deadline from deciding a young person's future. One recipient had the grades for an engineering program, but planned to postpone enrollment when his family's rent increased. The foundation could not repair every problem in his home. It could prevent one emergency from making the college decision for him. Applications were reviewed by an independent committee, and scholarship decisions were separated from fundraising. I founded the organization, but I never treated its accounts as mine. A charitable dollar became an obligation the moment we accepted it in a student's name. Our first board was small and serious. We adopted conflict policies, retained outside counsel, and required scholarship approvals to be documented. I wanted the organization to survive my mistakes as well as my absence. In 8 years, the foundation helped more than 140 students. Our first gala was held in a school cafeteria with donated pasta and programs folded by retired teachers. Lauren changed its scale. She understood presentation in a way I did not. She recruited local businesses, brought in a regional bank, negotiated part of a hotel package, and introduced recipient videos with the students' permission. Attendance doubled, then doubled again. By the 7th year, the gala had become one of the county's largest charitable events. Her contribution was real. She remembered sponsors' names, turned vague offers into written commitments, and could solve a seating crisis without making a donor feel blamed. She made a small foundation appear established enough for larger companies to trust. That competence was one reason the invoices escaped serious challenge for so long. Lauren did not take a salary. She reminded people of that often, though at first I heard pride rather than resentment. "I want Margaret's name to mean something beyond the school district," she once told me. I believed her. Nathan joined the board as treasurer. At 45, he was a successful sales director who understood financial reports. Lauren managed events and vendor relationships. Nathan reviewed payments. I thought their different strengths protected the foundation. I was proud that they wanted a place in work inspired by Margaret. Their marriage seemed to give us both creative ambition and financial discipline. I never considered that one might create urgency while the other approved the cost. Nathan believed I moved too cautiously. I believed he sometimes treated growth as proof that a decision was wise. Those disagreements did not worry me because he spoke about the foundation as his mother's legacy. I mistook his love for Margaret as protection against bad judgment. At board meetings, Nathan was usually the person who asked whether a pledge had cleared or a contract matched the budget. When he approved something, I assumed he had asked the questions I had not. Trust did not remove my responsibility, but it explained why 6 of his approvals looked ordinary until Tiana put her hand on that red folder. That evening I opened 14 months of vendor reports at my dining room table. North Star appeared repeatedly. The descriptions varied just enough to discourage comparison. One invoice used production management. Another used technical access. A third separated logistics from transportation, even though both appeared to cover the same day. No single page proved anything. The pattern emerged only when the pages were placed together. $42,000 for donor outreach with no list of donors contacted. $38,500 for video production, though I remembered a volunteer recording the student interviews. $29,800 for audiovisual rental. $21,400 for transportation. $34,900 for staging materials. Then the $48,000 emergency advance. After smaller adjustments and credits, the total paid to North Star was exact, $214,600. The amount represented more than a suspicious vendor balance. It could fund multiple students through the point where deposits, books, transportation, and tuition gaps made enrollment possible. I did not yet know that any of it had been stolen. I knew only that a foundation created to buy students' time had spent a great deal of money on descriptions no one could verify. I pulled the hotel agreement from our shared drive. Audio-visual equipment was already included. A miscellaneous event charge appeared to cover part of the same setup again. If the descriptions meant what they appeared to mean, we had paid for certain equipment 3 times. I checked the volunteer schedule. The man who filmed the student interviews appeared on it with no compensation. I searched for donor acquisition reports and found summaries praising engagement but no contact records. The more I compared North Star's claims with the Foundation's own files, the less the invoices described work I could identify. There could have been an innocent explanation. Large events require subcontractors. Contracts change. Bookkeeping categories overlap. An unusual number is not proof of misconduct, but it is a reason to verify. North Star's website showed polished photographs of lighting rigs, production crews, and crowded ballrooms. It did not name employees, identify a warehouse, or show a completed event linked to a real client. I searched the telephone number and found only the website. The photographs suggested scale, but the company left no ordinary trail of the people or property required to produce it. The business address belonged to a virtual office service. I checked the state corporate registry. North Star had been formed 6 weeks before it received its first foundation contract. Its registered owner was Gavin Hale, Lauren's older brother. Gavin had run several businesses. 2 had failed publicly, and I knew he had struggled to obtain credit after the last one closed. I had never heard him mention an event company. More importantly, I had never seen a conflict disclosure identifying him as the owner of a foundation vendor. Lauren knew our policy required disclosure before a relative's company could be considered. Nathan knew it too. A family vendor was not automatically forbidden, but the relationship had to be visible so independent directors could compare price, capacity, and need. Northstar had received 14 months of payments without that review. I called Nathan. "Did you know Northstar belongs to Gavin?" The silence lasted just long enough to matter. "Lauren handles the vendor relationships," he said. "Why are you asking me about this at night? Because you are the treasurer, and the foundation has paid her brother more than $200,000. Dad, Northstar did the work. The Gala is bigger every year. You wanted growth. That was not my question." He exhaled sharply. "Talk to Lauren. She can explain the contracts better than I can." Then he ended the call. I sat at the table with Margaret's framed copy of Rosa's letter visible through the open study door. Lauren had told me Northstar believed in our mission. The registry showed that the company had existed for 6 weeks before we hired it and belonged to the one relative no one had disclosed. I did not call Lauren. I called Denise Carter, the chair of our audit committee. And before I told her my daughter-in-law's name, I told her the amount. Denise did not react to the amount the way a friend would. She reacted like a former bank executive who knew alarm could destroy evidence faster than dishonesty did. "What do you have in front of you?" she asked. I described the invoices, the hotel contract, the corporate registry, and Nathan's refusal to answer directly. "Do not call him again tonight," she said. "Do not call Lauren or Gavin. Send copies to the secure board account and leave the originals where they are. Tiana is already worried. Tell her only that the audit committee will protect the records and anyone who raised a concern in good faith." Denise stayed on the telephone while I scanned the red folder documents. She asked which pages contained Nathan's approval, whether the hotel contract was signed before the Northstar invoice, and whether the corporate record showed an ownership date. Her questions gave the situation edges. We did not yet know whether we were looking at concealed self-dealing, inflated costs, or poor documentation. We knew enough to prevent the records from changing. Denise contacted Miriam Cole, our outside counsel. By 9 the next morning, the three of us were seated in the foundation's conference room with the blinds closed. Miriam had advised nonprofit boards for most of her career. She arranged the invoices by date, then read the conflict policy and Nathan's approval log. "The family relationship should have been disclosed," she said. "The unsupported billing may be more serious, but suspicion is not a finding." I asked whether we should confront Lauren and demand repayment. "No, do not expose Lauren because she embarrassed your family. Expose the transactions because they endangered the foundation. That requires an independent process, not an argument between a father and his son." It was difficult to hear because part of me wanted to drive to Nathan's house and place the registry record in front of him. Miriam understood that impulse. She also understood it could turn an institutional investigation into a family dispute, warn Gavin before records were secured, and allow Lauren to claim every later action was my retaliation. "You can be a father after the evidence is protected," she said. "Right now, the students need you to behave like a fiduciary." Denise convened the independent members of the audit committee. Nathan was excluded from the vendor review because his approvals appeared on the question payments and his brother-in-law owned Northstar. Under our bylaws, the committee could preserve records, restrict disbursements, retain outside professionals, and report its findings to the board. The foundation did not belong to my family. Its rules were meant to protect the mission from us as much as from anyone else. The first question was whether to cancel the gala. We were 11 weeks away. 22 students had been selected for scholarships. More than 400 donors and guests were expected. Sponsors had committed funds, the hotel contract carried cancellation costs, and the event was projected to raise more than $1 million. One committee member feared continuing would expose the foundation to more expense. Another warned that cancellation would damage donor confidence before we knew the facts. Denise asked what the students would lose if we stopped. Canceling would also abandon contracts with legitimate vendors and erase months of work by volunteers who had done nothing wrong. Yet continuing under Lauren's existing system risked another unsupported payment. The choice was not between a gala and no gala. It was between allowing the questioned vendor to control the event and rebuilding the event around verified services. Certainty, I said. Some need their awards before enrollment deadlines. They should not pay for a failure they did not create. Miriam closed the folder in front of her. We save the scholarships first. Then we save the truth. The committee voted to continue under new controls. Scholarship funds were placed in an account event operations could not reach. No North Star payment could be released without Denise's authorization and a second independent signature. The final $74,000 payment Lauren expected was put on hold pending verification. Our insurer and the appropriate charity regulator were notified. Miriam issued a record preservation instruction covering email, cloud files, accounting entries, vendor contracts, and board communications. Replacement vendors were hired at documented rates. The hotel confirmed its audiovisual obligations. A local staging company reserved materials directly, while transportation and video support were separated into agreements with specific deliverables. If North Star disappeared, the students would still walk onto a working stage. The replacement process also gave Patrick a clean comparison. The hotel listed the equipment already included. The staging company identified each item it would deliver. The transportation vendor named its vehicles and drivers. Ordinary vendors did not treat those requests as insults. They treated them as the information required to be paid. Denise sent Nathan formal notice that his North Star payment authority was suspended and asked him to recuse himself from related board discussions. He refused to sign. Nathan argued that recusal would imply wrongdoing and asked to attend the committee meetings so he could explain the payments. Miriam told him he could provide records and answer questions, but he could not participate in judging his own approvals. He called me immediately. You let Denise remove me from my own job. The committee acted under the bylaws. You are the founder. You could stop it. That is exactly why I will not. He called the review an attempt to humiliate Lauren before the gala. I reminded him that nothing had been announced publicly and no conclusion had been reached. Gavin is Lauren's brother, I said. A family relationship does not remove a conflict. It makes disclosure more important. Nathan lowered his voice. You are turning paperwork into betrayal. No. I am asking the paperwork to tell us whether there was one. Denise retained Patrick Ree, a forensic accountant with more than 20 years of experience investigating charities, schools, and membership organizations. Patrick arrived with a scanner, a laptop, and a list of records he wanted before offering any conclusion. Fraud inside a charity often hides behind work that sounds too urgent to verify, he said. So we remove the urgency and verify the work. He built a schedule for every North Star charge. One column showed what the invoice claimed. Another showed the contract that authorized it. A third showed proof of delivery. A fourth identified who actually performed the work. He did not begin by assuming the entire company was false. He gave each charge the chance to support itself. Tiana became the first internal witness. Miriam met with her privately, explained the whistleblower policy, and confirmed that Lauren could not retaliate against her for preserving records or answering the committee's questions. Tiana brought every email she had saved. She had asked for the names of North Star's production crew. Lauren said staffing shifted until event day. She requested vehicle information. Lauren referred to strategic logistics partners. She asked for a donor contact report and received a summary of engagement momentum without a single donor name. Tiana described the same pattern she had warned me about. Every request for proof produced another explanation instead. Patrick printed the sentence at the top of his working notes. Tiana's emails mattered because they showed the missing records had not been discovered only after the gala. Lauren had been asked for them while the services were supposedly being arranged. Each request produced a new description instead of proof. Patrick began with the hotel agreement. It already included the main sound system, projection screens, microphones, standard lighting, setup labor, and on-site technical support. North Star had billed $29,800 for many of the same items. Then he found a miscellaneous event charge, covering the same dates and quantities. He placed the 3 pages beside one another. Different labels do not make these different services. The hotel's event manager confirmed the overlap in writing. The dates, quantities, and room assignments matched. North Star could not identify supplemental equipment beyond what the hotel had already supplied, and the miscellaneous charge used different terminology for the same setup. The video invoice was next. North Star charged $38,500 for recipient interviews, editing, and production management. The volunteer who recorded the interviews still possessed the raw files and editing timeline. Lauren's email thanked him for donating the complete project. North Star had not filmed the interviews, edited them, or paid the volunteer. Gavin's company had invoiced the foundation for work it received free. The volunteer still had messages from Lauren approving the edits and thanking him for saving the foundation the cost of professional production. North Star's name did not appear anywhere in the raw files, editing history, or email chain. It appeared only when the invoice arrived. Transportation and staging produced the same absence of proof. North Star billed $21,400 for vehicles and delivery, but had no vehicle, driver list, shipping manifest, or delivery record. The $34,900 staging charge had no purchase order, storage receipt, or inventory. Images in Gavin's proposal came from an equipment company in another state. The hotel's loading log showed that limited equipment used at the previous gala arrived in a van belonging to a subcontractor already covered by the hotel package. The company whose images appeared in Gavin's proposal confirmed that North Star had never rented the equipment shown. On paper, North Star claimed 12 employees, specialized equipment, and experience in event production, audiovisual services, and donor outreach. Patrick could verify no permanent staff, warehouse equipment, or event of comparable size. When real work occurred, Gavin used volunteers. Services already included elsewhere, or small subcontractors paid far less than North Star charged. The donor outreach invoice completed the pattern. North Star received $42,000 after claiming it had brought 280 new donors into our network. Lauren had repeated that figure at 2 board meetings. Patrick requested the contact list. Lauren produced a spreadsheet within an hour. Tiana's archived databases showed where it came from. The names had existed in foundation records before North Star was formed. Many belonged to longtime donors. Some were duplicates or returned addresses. Several belonged to people who had died. North Star had relabeled our old records and charged $42,000 for discovering our own database. Several of the supposed new donors had given to the foundation before Lauren joined the event committee. Others shared addresses because the spreadsheet duplicated household members. Returned mail had already marked some records inactive. The list looked impressive only until someone compared it with the source file. Lauren noticed the new controls within 2 days. She entered my office with a payment summary and closed the door. Denise put North Star's final payment into review. Do you know anything about that? The committee is tightening close-out procedures before the gala, without telling the event director. Every vendor file needs complete support. She placed the summary on my desk. North Star reserved capacity for us. If we delay them, Gavin could release the equipment. It was the first time she had used her brother's name in connection with the company. She did not acknowledge that the relationship had never been disclosed. She spoke as if our failure was not paying him quickly enough. Then make sure every file is complete before the board review, I said. Lauren studied my face. You understand that events do not run on school district paperwork. No, they run on donor money. The paperwork explains why it was spent. The professional warmth left her eyes for a moment. Then she smiled. Fine. I will give Denise more documentation than she knows what to do with. She left believing I was an old principal insisting on forms. That belief protected the audit, but every calm conversation required me to act as though Margaret's name had not been printed across invoices for work no one could find. Nathan called that afternoon. Lauren says the committee is interfering with the Gala. The committee is reviewing vendor files. North Star needs to be paid when its services are verified. You are treating a routine contract like a criminal case. I looked at the approval log. Nathan had authorized 6 North Star payments. Then a routine review should resolve it quickly. He was silent. Are you trying to push Lauren out? I am trying to learn what the foundation purchased. The Gala still happened last year. It will happen this year. The students are getting their scholarships. That is not proof that every invoice was honest. He ended the call. Patrick spent the next 4 weeks matching contracts to delivery records, volunteer logs, vendor confirmations, and donor databases. Genuine subcontracted services were credited at documented value. Gavin responded with revised descriptions, undated summaries, and consultant names that could not be connected to a deliverable. Each new submission made North Star sound busier while proving less. A list of consultants contained no hours or work product. A production summary repeated language from the original invoices. Revised service descriptions arrived after Patrick identified the gaps, but none supplied the missing vehicle, equipment, donor contact, or completed video. Miriam coordinated the financial requests. The verified account records came through North Star's production to counsel, insurer recovery requests, and the regulator's process, not through direct access by the foundation. At the end of the 4th week, Patrick asked Denise, Miriam, Tiana, and me to meet after the office closed. 14 invoices were arranged across the conference table beside the hotel agreement. Volunteer records, vendor confirmations, donor comparisons, and North Star's corporate file. Patrick had reconstructed what each event should have cost using the hotel agreement and actual subcontractor records. The comparison did not erase legitimate work. It showed that legitimate work represented only a fraction of what North Star claimed. Patrick did not call the full amount stolen. Some subcontracted work had been delivered, and the remaining transaction records were still being verified. He placed one hand on the invoices. Howard, the problem is not that her brother charged too much. The problem is that most of what he charged for never existed. Then he turned his laptop toward me. On the screen was the first verified transfer made from North Star's account 2 days after a foundation payment. The recipient was not an event vendor. It was the company servicing Nathan and Lauren's mortgage. For several seconds, I stared at the name of the mortgage company and tried to find an explanation that did not involve my son. Patrick did not offer me one. The foundation paid North Star. 2 days later, North Star made a payment toward the mortgage on Nathan and Lauren's home. As more verified records arrived, the sequence appeared again. $5,000 money entered North Star's account. Within days, portions left for Lauren's credit card, the mortgage company, a resort reservation, or transfers labeled consulting reimbursement. Other amounts went toward Gavin's business loan and old vendor debts. The benefits reaching Nathan and Lauren's household totaled approximately $37,000. Patrick mapped the transactions on a timeline. The descriptions changed, but the order did not. Foundation money arrived first. Personal relief followed, one foundation payment cleared, and 2 days later North Star paid the mortgage company. After another invoice, Lauren's credit card balance fell through a payment routed from Gavin's account. A resort reservation followed another foundation transfer. North Star was not using its revenue to build the capacity described in its proposals. It was relieving immediate pressure on Gavin and on the household approving his bills. Patrick showed only the records necessary to establish the sequence. He did not treat the family's private spending as entertainment. The issue was not where Lauren preferred to travel or what she purchased. The issue was that charitable money reached personal obligations after invoices for services we could not verify. Lauren had described North Star as a strategic partner, discounting its work because it believed in our mission. In reality, the company kept money for Gavin and returned part of it to the household of the two people responsible for its contracts and payments. Could Gavin call this repayment of a personal loan? I asked. He can call it anything, Patrick said. We test the claim against timing, records, and disclosure. No loan appeared on Nathan's or Lauren's conflict statements. There was no promissory note in the vendor file, and no repayment schedule predating North Star's foundation income. I had prepared myself to discover that Nathan was careless. I had not prepared myself to see his mortgage inside a scholarship audit. Patrick asked whether I needed a break. The students did not get a break when their money was moved, I said. Keep going. The next issue was whether Nathan knew Gavin owned North Star when he approved its invoices during his committee interview. Nathan said he had assumed Lauren found the company through an industry contact. He admitted learning later that Gavin was involved, but insisted he did not know when the first contract was approved. Lauren handled vendor selection, he said. I reviewed payment totals. I did not investigate corporate ownership. Patrick asked why no conflict disclosure was filed after he supposedly learned the truth. Nathan said he trusted Lauren to handle it. 2 days later, Tiana found an archived email attached to the original proposal. The Foundation's cloud system retained an earlier version even after the attachment was replaced. Nathan had written the message before North Star received its first contract. Make sure your last name is not on the proposal. Dad hates family vendors. Nathan had not discovered the relationship later. He knew before the first approval. He understood the conflict rule well enough to help conceal the fact that it applied. By then, he had signed 6 North Star payments and refused Denise's request to recuse himself from the vendor review. That refusal mattered differently after the email. A treasurer who learned of a conflict late might fail to respond quickly enough. Nathan had known before the contract existed, helped remove the clue that would expose it, then resisted the committee reviewing his approvals. Those were separate decisions made over 14 months, not one mistake committed under pressure. Denise called him back and placed the email in front of him. This is being taken out of context, he said. Give us the context, Denise replied. Nathan said Gavin needed a chance and that I was prejudiced against family vendors. He claimed the hidden ownership allowed North Star's proposal to be judged fairly. You signed 6 payments, I said. Did you know then? I knew Gavin was helping with some of the work. That is not what I asked. He rubbed his thumb along the edge of the email. The gala still happened. No one was supposed to lose anything. Then why did you need them never to know? He looked toward Miriam. Am I being accused of something? You are being given an opportunity to respond to verified records, she said. You should consider retaining your own counsel. Nathan left without looking at me. I remained in the conference room after everyone stood. On the table were 6 approvals carrying his name. I remembered teaching him to balance a checking account at our kitchen table, and Margaret reminding him that accuracy was a form of respect for whoever depended on the money. Memory did not make the evidence less clear. It made clarity hurt more. For weeks, I had treated the investigation as a problem of invoices and controls. His email made it more painful. My son knew the rule, concealed the relationship, signed the payments, benefited at home, and resisted the review meant to protect the foundation track. Return to the accounts because numbers did not become less important when the people behind them broke your heart. He found a transfer of $25,000 from the scholarship disbursement account into event operations. The account had been designated exclusively for approved scholarship disbursements and could not be used for event expenses without independent authorization. Lauren initiated the transfer. Nathan approved it. Event operations then paid part of North Star's emergency production advance. There was no independent authorization. The accounting entry used a temporary cash management description, as if moving money between accounts changed its purpose. Nathan's approval converted Lauren's request into a completed transfer. Neither of them notified the scholarship committee, whose approved awards depended on that balance. The money was returned later, but several scholarship payments had already been delayed. One belonged to Marcus Green. Marcus was 18 and would be the first person in his family to attend college. His mother worked 2 jobs, and he helped care for a younger cousin after school. His award had been approved before the gala because his enrollment deposit was due early. The public ceremony would recognize the scholarship, not decide whether he received it. His application did not dramatize those responsibilities. It described them in the same careful language he used in his emails. He studied after his mother returned from her second job and planned his class schedule around the hours his family needed him. The scholarship committee selected him because he had done excellent work while carrying obligations many adults would have found exhausting. The college waited 6 weeks for the foundation payment. Lauren marked the delay as a processing problem. Tiana had preserved Marcus's emails. He remained polite in everyone. First, he asked whether the college needed another form. Then he asked whether the award amount had changed. In the final message, he explained that he might postpone enrollment for a year because his family could not replace the missing deposit. While Marcus waited to learn whether college remained possible, North Star held foundation money for equipment it did not own. I asked Denise for permission to contact him only after the restricted account had released his full award to the college. I did not tell Marcus about the audit. He should not be made responsible for our failure or turned into evidence in a dispute between adults. I apologized for what I called an internal processing error. I thought I had done something wrong, he said. You did not. My mother was going to put the deposit on a credit card. She does not have room on it, but she was going to try. I pictured a woman finishing one shift, preparing for another, and checking an almost exhausted credit limit because an organization bearing Margaret's name had failed to send money it had already promised. The college confirmed receipt this morning, I said. Your place is secure. Marcus was quiet for a moment. This scholarship did not make college cheaper. It made college possible. After the call, I stood in the lobby before Rosa's handwritten letter. You did not pay for my tuition. You bought me enough time to become someone. Marcus had nearly lost 6 weeks of that purchased time because Lauren and Nathan believed they could replace the money before anyone important noticed. For his mother, 6 weeks could have meant a nearly exhausted credit card, a lost enrollment place, or another year of work before college. That was the lie beneath the invoices. They did not think of the students as the owners of the money. By Gala week, Patrick's report had been reviewed by Miriam, the audit committee, our insurer, and regulatory representatives. The independent board members approved a limited presentation of verified records after scholarships were awarded, and the students and families had moved to a separate reception. Some directors preferred a private suspension followed by a written donor notice. Denise argued that remaining silent while Nathan sought greater authority for Lauren would allow the audience to rely on claims the board knew were false. Miriam set the boundary. Patrick could present verified findings, and Denise could announce actions already authorized. No one would use the stage to predict charges or punish my family for the audience's satisfaction, I agreed. If I could not separate grief from governance, I had no right to speak. The presentation would cover corporate ownership, invoices, service confirmations, verified transfers, and governance decisions. It would not announce criminal guilt. Charges, restitution, and court action belonged to the authorities and would come later. Denise also required every major vendor file to contain a final service delivery certification before closeout. The form was not created for Lauren. It became part of the Foundation's standard compliance process for every major vendor. The event director had to certify that services were delivered, prices reflected market value, family relationships were disclosed, no payment produced an undisclosed personal benefit, and the vendor possessed the capacity claimed in its contract. Every other major vendor completed the same form. The hotel attached its equipment schedule. The replacement staging company attached delivery records. The transportation provider identified vehicles and drivers. Compliance did not require a trap. It required ordinary vendors to document ordinary work. Lauren completed North Star's certification on the afternoon of the gala. She entered my office wearing the dark blue dress she had chosen for the stage. Her hair and makeup were finished. She placed the signed form in front of me with the confidence of someone submitting proof of her own success. Everything Denise requested, she said. Every service delivered. Every cost justified, and no hidden benefit to anyone. The invoices showed where the money went. Her certification showed what she chose to affirm after being asked one final time. The audit committee will add it to the file, I said. Lauren handed me the pen as if she expected me to sign beside her. I capped it and placed it on the folder. Are you proud of what I built? I am proud that 22 students will receive what they were promised tonight. She smiled as if the answer belonged to her. I did not sign the certification. Nathan arrived a few minutes later. He had avoided being alone with me since his second interview, but beside Lauren, he behaved as if the audit were a procedural disagreement. After tonight, we need leadership that can manage this scale full-time, he said. Lauren told him not to spoil the surprise. They believed the final $74,000 payment awaited only Gala closeout. They also believed Nathan had enough board support to nominate Lauren as executive director, giving her greater authority over contracts, budgets, and staff. Lauren spoke about the position as if it were the natural recognition of years spent working without a salary. She had raised more money, expanded the event, and made the foundation visible to larger sponsors. In her mind, those achievements entitled her to control that no conflict form should interrupt. The independent directors knew his intention. Miriam advised us not to prevent him from making the proposal. No director would consider it before the record was corrected. That evening, the gala worked exactly as it should. Replacement vendors delivered the stage, lighting, sound, transportation, and video support at documented rates. More than 400 guests filled the ballroom. Lauren greeted sponsors by name, solved a seating problem without raising her voice, and accepted congratulations as if every working microphone proved North Star had earned its invoices. When I entered the lobby, Rosa's letter was missing from its easel. I found it on a storage table behind a decorative wall. Lauren saw me lift the frame. It looks too homemade for the new brand, she said. I replaced it with the digital history display. This letter is the history. Howard, please. The room finally looks professional. Lauren walked away before I answered. That small dismissal clarified what the evening meant to her. The gala had become a brand she believed she built. The handwritten reason for its existence had become clutter. I carried it to my table, and placed it beside Patrick's black folder. The scholarship ceremony came first. Each of the 22 students crossed the stage, received an award packet, and posed for a photograph. Every award was already protected. No student was asked to describe the hardest part of life for the benefit of donors. Their names, schools, and plans were enough. The ceremony belonged to what they had achieved, not to what Lauren, Nathan, or I had done. Marcus spoke last. He thanked his mother, his teachers, and the donors. He did not mention the delay. He said being first in a family to attend college meant learning to walk through a door no one around you had seen from the other side. Then he repeated the words he had told me. This scholarship did not make college cheaper. It made college possible. The room stood for him. After the photographs, staff escorted the students and their families to a private dessert reception in adjoining rooms. They left smiling with flowers and award packets, without being asked to watch my family come apart. At my table, Patrick rested one hand on the audit folder. The students were safe. The money was protected. Now the adults who had trusted Lauren were about to hear what she had done with that trust. At 8:17, Lauren raised her glass and repeated the promise I had already heard her rehearse. Transparency is not simply one of our values. It is the promise we make to every student and every family who trusts us. The donors applauded. Nathan applauded louder than anyone. Lauren declared that the evening proved what honesty could accomplish. Then Nathan stepped to the microphone. He praised her for transforming a school cafeteria dinner into a major charitable event. He credited her with attracting sponsors, expanding attendance, and carrying Margaret's legacy beyond anything the original board had imagined. For that reason, he said, I am asking the board to appoint Lauren Ellis as our next executive director. Guests applauded because they had no reason to know what was inside Patrick's folder. Lauren looked at me, expecting approval. I stood with Rosa's letter in one hand and North Star's certified vendor file in the other. Before any director considers that proposal, we need to discuss the standard Lauren just described. The applause stopped, because donors and directors were being asked to rely on Lauren's certification and Nathan's proposal that night. The independent board had a duty to correct the record before anyone acted on false information. I carried Rosa's framed letter to the stage. Lauren removed this from the lobby because she said it looked too homemade, but this letter is the only reason any of us are in this room. I read the sentence Margaret and I had carried for years. You did not pay for my tuition. You bought me enough time to become someone. No one applauded. The room understood that applause was no longer the appropriate response. The letter had never been valuable as an object. Its frame was inexpensive, the paper had faded, and Rosa's handwriting leaned unevenly across the page. Its value came from the obligation it created. Someone had trusted Margaret and me with enough money and time to reach a future she could not reach alone. Lauren saw a handwritten letter, I said. Margaret saw the reason the foundation existed. Patrick joined me with the audit report and began with North Star's corporate record. The company was formed 6 weeks before its first foundation contract. It used a virtual office, claimed 12 employees and extensive production capacity, and listed Gavin Hale as its owner, Lauren's brother. Lauren reached for the microphone. Gavin has worked in business for years. Everyone knew he was involved. Denise stood beside the stage. The board did not know because you signed disclosures stating no relative controlled the vendor. The relationship was irrelevant. North Star was selected because it could do the work. A family relationship does not remove a conflict, Denise said. It makes disclosure more important. Patrick displayed the archived email Nathan had sent before the first contract. Make sure your last name is not on the proposal. Dad hates family vendors. Nathan stared at his own sentence. I wanted the proposal judged fairly. You wanted the relationship hidden, Denise replied. Patrick moved to the services. The hotel package already included the main sound system, screens, microphones, lighting, setup labor, and technical support. North Star still billed $29,800 for the same audiovisual items. A miscellaneous event account charged the foundation again for matching dates and quantities. For these items, Patrick said, the foundation did not pay twice. It paid 3 times. Next came North Star's $38,500 video invoice. The volunteer's raw files and editing history proved he had recorded and completed the project without charge. Lauren's email thanked him for donating all of it. North Star appeared nowhere in the production record. Its name appeared only on the invoice. Patrick grouped the remaining unsupported services together. North Star had no vehicle or delivery record for transportation, no purchase order or inventory for staging materials, and no new donors behind its $42,000 outreach claim. The supposed donor list came from the foundation's old database and included long-time donors, duplicate entries, returned mail, and people who had died. The audit credited the limited subcontracted work North Star could prove at documented market value. Most of what remained existed only as descriptions on Gavin's invoices. Gavin stood. We provided consulting. You cannot reduce strategy to delivery receipts. Patrick looked directly at him. Then naming a single deliverable should not be difficult. Gavin looked toward Lauren and sat down without naming one. Patrick turned to the verified transfer timeline. Approximately $37,000 had moved from North Star toward benefits for Nathan and Lauren's household. The mortgage was the clearest example. Credit card payments and a resort booking followed the same pattern. Nanausi's money entered North Star's account. Within days, personal obligations were paid. Lauren said Gavin had been repaying a private family loan. The transfers began 2 days after foundation payments, Patrick answered. No loan was disclosed, and no repayment schedule existed before North Star began receiving charitable funds. Then the screen showed the transfer of $25,000 from the account designated for approved scholarships into event operations. Lauren initiated it. Nathan approved it. North Star received an emergency production payment while Marcus Green's college waited 6 weeks for his award. I looked toward the doors through which Marcus and the other students had already left. While Marcus waited to know whether he could enroll, North Star received money for equipment it did not own. Nathan stepped toward me. Dad, the scholarships were still going to be paid after your mortgage. His face changed because the logic he had used privately sounded different in a ballroom bearing his mother's name. Denise held up the final service delivery certification Lauren had signed that afternoon. It affirmed that all services had been delivered, prices reflected market value, family relationships were disclosed. North Star possessed the capacity it claimed, and no payment produced an undisclosed personal benefit. Lauren's signature appeared beneath every false assurance. The invoices showed where the money went. The certification showed what Lauren chose to claim after the committee required one clear final answer. No one had forged her signature or invented a form for her alone. Every major vendor had completed the same process, and she had reaffirmed the false record on the day she expected that record to earn her a promotion. This is no longer an accounting misunderstanding, Miriam said. Lauren turned toward the donors. I raised more money for this foundation than anyone in this room. We raised more because of me than Howard ever could have raised alone. That did not make the money yours. I worked without a salary for years. I built this gala. Gavin was struggling, and I was trying to help my family. The transfers were temporary reimbursements. No student was supposed to lose anything. Marcus almost lost his place, but he did not, because the audit committee restored the money you moved. Lauren's professional composure finally began to fracture. You let me stand up here, knowing all of this. I let the students receive what they were promised before your choices became the center of the night. I kept my voice level. You used children who needed scholarships to pay your brother for work that existed only on his invoices. Denise approached the microphone with resolutions approved by the independent directors. Nathan's proposal was stopped. Lauren was suspended from every foundation role. Nathan was suspended as treasurer and from all financial authority. North Star's contract was terminated, and the final $74,000 payment would not be released. The records were being referred to our insurer, the banks, the charity regulator, and the appropriate investigators. Scholarship funds would remain protected, and an independent report would be issued to donors. Lauren demanded to know when the full board had voted. Denise explained that the independent directors had acted under our conflict provisions. Howard, Nathan, and Lauren had not voted on sanctions affecting their family. I had provided evidence and spoken about the mission. I had not suspended anyone by myself. You cannot run the foundation without me, Lauren said. The gala services were delivered tonight by vendors retained under independent review, Denise replied. The students received their awards. The foundation is already operating without North Star. That answer struck Lauren more deeply than the numbers. She had treated her ability to produce the gala as protection against scrutiny. The event had succeeded after North Star's payment was frozen because legitimate vendors delivered identifiable work at documented prices. Her leverage had disappeared before she entered the ballroom. Nathan said he had approved payments in good faith. Denise reminded him that his email, 6 approvals, refusal to recuse, and household benefit remained part of the investigation. Suspension was not a conviction. It was the board refusing to leave a conflicted treasurer in control of charitable money. No police officers entered the ballroom. No one announced guilt that a court had not determined. After the presentation, preservation notices were delivered to Lauren, Nathan, and Gavin. They were instructed not to delete communications, alter records, or dispose of relevant devices. Further action would follow the lawful process already underway. Lauren had walked toward the stage expecting a title. She left without a position, a vendor contract, or a room willing to accept the word transparency from her. Without proof, the ballroom did not erupt. Donors spoke in low voices and approached Denise with questions. Several people avoided me, unsure whether condolence or anger was appropriate. That suited me. I had no interest in being congratulated for watching my family collapse beneath Margaret's name. After the last guest left, I remained while hotel staff cleared the tables. The banner still hung above the stage. Rosa's letter rested beside the closed audit folder. For 8 years, I had thought preserving Margaret's legacy meant protecting the foundation's reputation. That night reminded me that reputation was useful only when it followed honest work. I carried the letter home. It was the least expensive object in the ballroom and the only one I trusted without qualification. The next morning, the foundation issued a written notice describing the suspensions, protected scholarship funds, and independent investigation. Some donors paused future gifts. Few resigned from committees. Most asked whether the students would still receive their money. The answer was yes. We sent direct confirmation to every recipient and college. Denise led donor briefings with Patrick and the independent committee. Tiana's warnings became part of the corrective report, and she received written protection from retaliation. The foundation admitted that it had failed to give her concerns a route around the people authorizing payment. We did not ask Tiana to become the public face of the scandal. She had done her job by asking for proof and saving the answers. The board's responsibility was to build a system in which the next bookkeeper would not need courage simply to make an ordinary request. Donor confidence returned slowly, not because we promised trust, but because we published evidence and proved no scholarship would be reduced to cover the loss. 3 months after the gala, Nathan came to my house. Lauren says the foundation could settle quietly, he said. If you tell Miriam this was a family loan dispute, it could keep things from getting worse. It was not a family loan dispute. She is still my wife, and you were still the treasurer. He looked toward the 2 coffee cups that remained in my cabinet. Mom would not have wanted the family destroyed. Your mother would not have asked Marcus to sacrifice college to protect our name. I did not think of it that way. That was the problem. You thought about Gavin's business, Lauren's reputation, your mortgage, and whether I would object. You thought about the students only after deciding the money could be put back. Nathan admitted knowing from the beginning that North Star belonged to Gavin. He said he believed Lauren when she called the transfers temporary. Every approval made admitting the previous one more difficult. It was his first honest explanation. It did not erase his choices, but it gave us a place from which a relationship might someday be rebuilt. I wanted to tell him honesty had arrived soon enough to repair everything. It had not. Forgiveness and restored trust were not the same decision. I could remain his father while refusing to ask the foundation, its donors, or its students to treat delayed truth as innocence. He offered to repay the mortgage benefit and said Lauren could return the credit card payments. He asked whether making the foundation whole could be enough. Returning the money is required, I said. It does not turn the invoices into real work, and it does not make the concealment disappear. He asked whether I was cutting him and my grandchildren from my life. The children did not approve those payments. I will not punish them for what you did, and I will not lie for you to keep access to them. I did not stop loving my son. I stopped allowing love to function as an exemption from truth. 10 months after the gala, North Star had closed. Gavin entered a plea related to fraudulent invoices and was ordered to pay restitution. Lauren faced civil recovery claims and criminal charges arising from false certifications and personal transfers. Nathan remained subject to the regulatory investigation and entered a civil restitution agreement covering the payments he approved and the benefit his households received. Authorities treated his cooperation, repayment, and evidentiary role differently from Gavin's creation of invoices and Lauren's vendor certifications. Different treatment did not mean no accountability. Repayment was an obligation, not an act of heroism. Nathan resigned from the board, lost financial responsibilities at work, and separated from Lauren before the cases were resolved. The insurer recovered part of the foundation's loss, and our civil action pursued the remainder. Every scholarship was paid. Marcus completed his first year without another delayed disbursement. His completion notice arrived with a short message thanking the foundation for keeping its promise. He still did not know the details of the investigation, and there was no reason to place that burden on him. The best evidence that the foundation survived was not a courtroom outcome. It was a student moving into his second year on time. The foundation published audited statements and a corrective action report. We hired a professional executive director through an independent search, expanded the board, verified vendor ownership before contracting, and required 2 independent signatures for significant payments. Donors received access to a public transparency portal. When those reforms were operating, I stepped away from daily authority. Using the scandal to preserve my permanent control would have taught the wrong lesson. The foundation had to become stronger than its founder, as well as stronger than his family. On the first morning under the new executive director, I returned Rosa's letter to the main lobby. It had no digital effects and no expensive frame. It hung where every student entering the office could read it. You did not pay for my tuition. You bought me enough time to become someone. Lauren used the foundation because she believed charity money belonged to no one in particular. Margaret taught me the opposite. Every dollar already belonged to the student still waiting for a chance. If your son and daughter-in-law used a scholarship charity to secretly pay their own family, would returning the money ever be enough? Or does taking from children who needed help reveal something no apology can repair?